Hello fellow 3D enthusiast, my name is Ian, and as you can see here, today I'm going to share with you a super rudimentary motion capture setup. So today I thought I would share with you a interesting new technique that I just came up with to do motion capture. And if the phrase motion capture doesn't ring a bell, think really expensive studios with really expensive suits and lots of cameras, and then somebody gets in the suit and acts like a monkey, and then they apply that to a monkey later, and they have monkey motions, and they captured them. So the main reason motion capture is a big thing is because animation is hard, and it takes a long time to do, which you might already be familiar with if you followed the last couple of tutorials on animation that I created. But today, I'm going to be doing a little bit of motion capture. And this is a pretty experimental technique, and it's also fairly limited. So if you're thinking like full range of motion running around, you're probably going to be a little bit bummed out. But if you think more like standing around in line or something like that, this is probably something that can do. So the main idea with this is it's going to capture one point of motion and rotation, and if we play our cards right, we can apply this to one bone in a skeleton, and then have that kind of drive the main weight shifting bone. So with that big long intro out of the way, let's talk about the technique that we're going to use. So for this, you'll probably need a couple of cameras, and you don't have to have like giant $600 cameras or anything like that. You can use a couple of phones, or just a different camera and a phone, or a GoPro. GoPros are actually probably ideal because we're going to be strapping one of these to our body. The only thing that you have to be aware of with the cameras is that they are shooting the same frame rate, because if you have different frame rates, that'll start to mess things up. But I'm going to stop talking here and actually get set up, and I'll show you what you need to do. So first of all, we're probably going to want a camera on a tripod, and that has to be locked off so it's not moving around. And then second of all, our other camera is going to be strapped around our waist. And it's probably a good idea to have that facing forwards. So when you have both of your cameras set up like that, start rolling, and then do some kind of movement that both of the cameras can see at the same time, just so that you can synchronize the two videos. And once you've done that, just back up to around where the camera on the tripod is pointing, and then do your motion. It's important to keep in mind that the faster you move around, the more motion blur there will be on the camera strapped to your body, so it'll be a little bit harder the faster you move around, but if you're just doing kind of like an idle animation, this will work really well for that. So once you have all that recorded, you can dump all that onto your computer, and that's when we hop into Blender. So here in Blender, we can start putting this stuff together. What I'm going to start by doing is taking the corner down here and splitting the window so it goes like that. And then I'm going to take this corner here and split the window once more. And I'm going to make it so that there are two movie clip editors down here. So go down here to movie clip editor, and here to movie clip editor. And so we've got two videos right now. Alright, over here I've got my shot on the tripod. And over here, I have my shot from what was mounted on my waist. So we're going to have to line up the bottom a little bit. I'm going to put a marker where the first one snaps. And then, if we actually scooch this up a little bit, we can actually see what's going on. And then where this one snaps, we're going to put a marker also. So right there. And you can do the difference math if you want. What I'm going to do is just go to frame offset here, and then type in 243 minus 186. So 243 minus 186. There we go. And that should give us the correct offset so that they are both synced up. Nice. Alright. Cool. Now if we go way out here to when I'm actually ready to do the motion, you can kind of see what's going on there. Probably when I get to about this point is when I'm going to want to start the tracking. So I'm going to take this here where it says playback and set start frame, and then we can go to however far we want to set the end frame. We can go up here or something, maybe around there, and just hit set end frame. The more I whip the camera around, the harder this is going to be to track, but it should be a huge issue. Just going to be a little bit tricky. That's all good. Let's start with the easy shot to track, and this is just going to be a track to get the location of the camera. And so I'm going to go shift space in this screen, and I'm going to hit T to get my toolbar back, and I'm just going to track the camera here. So if we go shift and left mouse button, we'll get back to the start of the clip, and then if you hold control and hit left mouse button, that will add in a tracker. We can scale this up a little bit, and then track it forward. When I'm tracking, I like to toggle L so that the view is locked to the tracker and I can see if it's messing up or not. But so far, we've had a few mess ups. Just replace it where it was and keep tracking forward. I have some custom hotkeys set to track it forward, so that's what I'm doing right now. Makes it a little bit faster. You don't have to go over and click that. And I'm just tracking the lens of the camera here, and that will give us a good location of our camera. I'd say this is probably enough. It's quite a few frames here, so I'm just going to set this to be the end frame, playback, and set end frame. There we go. Now we've got this all tracked, which is great. So what this is going to do is just give us the location of the camera. And then over here in this frame, we actually have the footage from the camera. And with this, we're going to figure out how the camera is rotating. If you wanted, you could do a 3D solve on this, but it is really whipping around and you need like 8 tracks that are all on the same keyframe or something like that. It gets pretty complicated with a 3D track. So what we're going to do is just a tripod track, even though it's moving around. A tripod track will figure out how the camera is rotating without much hassle, because you only need about 4 tracks to get anything good. And we've got a lot of motion blur here, but that's alright, we'll figure it out. So once again, just doing a few tracks. This time, I'm going to track the camera, because that's really nice and high contrast. Woo! There it goes. And once again, hitting L, just to lock that to the track that we have. Camera goes off screen for a second here. That's all right. It'll come back. And it is right here. And tripod tracks are really forgiving, especially when you're not trying to track some CG objects into footage. If you're just using it to capture the rotation of a camera, it's a lot harder to notice when something is messed up in your track. And I'm just tracking this to the camera every time the camera comes into the frame. Alright, we reached the end of the footage. If you just take a look here, you can see every time it hits the camera, and it tracks pretty nicely. The first time I tried doing this, I was using a really crappy off-brand GoPro, which was just absolutely painful to track. So it's really nice to be working with this camera. Obviously, if you strap a heavier camera to your waist, it'll have a little bit more of its own motion, and it won't be as tightly synchronized. So that's kind of why I recommend something more like a GoPro. There are quite a few cheap options these days that are actually nice if you pay any attention to reviews, which I have not bought, but I probably would recommend using one of those. You can get a decent one for about $50. Dang, this thing is tracking motion blur like a boss. Alright, now if we play through with this track, you can see we lose it again. But that's okay. It's really tracking pretty nicely. Alright, let's get some more tracks in here. When the camera kind of pans off to the side and loses these tracks, we're going to need some more. So over here, there's a nice house that we can track. Just go through and get that really nice. And if it goes out of frame, that's alright, not a big deal. So the main deal here is just to get a few tracks in every part of the footage, just so that Blender can kind of see how the camera is rotating. When things are right on the edge of frame, they're a lot harder for Blender to track, so we're just going to leave that there for now. And then it picks up here again. Alright, so quite a ridiculous bit of tracking later. We've got this, and I'm going to untab lock with L, and if we go up here somewhere, you can kind of see how Blender might get an idea how the camera is moving. Cool. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm going to re-enable the footage there, and if we just go solve, and then check tripod, and then solve camera motion, we get a average reprojection error of 11, which normally would be absolutely horrible. But since we're just doing motion tracking, shouldn't be a big issue. Alright, so I'm going to set up some cameras here. I'm going to go into the front view with number pad 1, and then just get some more space here. And I'm going to go Control, Alt, and 0 on the number pad. And that will just set our active camera to be where we are viewing. And then I'm going to grab it and move it up on the Z-axis so we can kind of see the grid here. And that's that camera all set up. If we go into this scene down here and then under reconstruction, go link empty to track, there will be an empty there on the origin. And if we just kind of grab this camera and move it up and then take a look here, this empty will be moving around like this track here. If we go T and N to see what we're doing, those are indeed moving around in synchronization. Cool. So now what we're going to do is add in another camera. And I'm going to go Shift A and camera. There you go. If we take the camera and kind of rotate it around to where the camera on my waist is, at like this point, it is facing us. So if we can set it there, then just kind of rotate it a little bit. Something like that. Maybe rotate it up a little bit. And then just grab it to be right around near the track. Just in front of it works. Alright, now we need the camera to rotate correctly. And to do that, what we're going to do is hit Control and 0 on the number pad, and that will make this the active camera. And then with this, we're going to go into our Constraints tab down here and add in a camera solver. Now this just says active clip. If we uncheck that and then check that to be waist shot, which is our movie of the crazy track that we just did, it actually looks pretty good. Alright, so one thing that is a good idea to do is to take this camera and then go Shift S and cursor to selected, and then add in another empty with Shift A, empty, and a plane axis will work fine. If we take this empty and then select the camera and go Control P, then the empty will rotate around like the camera is. And this is just a good way to reset the rotation. If we just directly select the camera, the bones will go kind of crazy. But at this point, we have the rotation of what this camera is doing, and we also have the location of it. And if we want to make this our active camera by going Control and 0 on the number pad, we can kind of see this rig moving around. And that is pretty cool. Alright, so where is the part where we add in the rig? That is this part. Now in another scene here, I'm just going to grab my siren head monster. I'm just going to select the rig and go Shift and right bracket just to make sure everything is selected up here. And then I'm going to go Control C and copy objects. Now back to this scene, if you go Control V, that will paste the objects that you copied in the other Blender file into this Blender file. Now with our rig here, we can actually start doing some fun stuff. If we take our camera here and load in a background image, but not just an image, we're going to go full movie clip, and let's try this one. Here we go. Alright, that's the one of me standing there, and that is synchronized with this shot here, so he's doing that. Alright, cool. What I'm going to do is just kind of take the rig of the siren head monster and just kind of match that up with what I'm doing in that video. So something like that. Obviously he's a lot more lanky than I am, so we'll get to do some kind of translation stuff just to get that working. But now that we have the rig and the model roughly placed where we want them, we can just take these two movie clip editors down here and collapse them in on themselves by hitting the corner and just dragging that over. And then we can make our 3D space a lot bigger here. Now what I'm going to do is hit Tab with the armature selected and go into pose mode. And this bone here is pretty much where we had the camera mounted, which is the main rotation and weight shifting bone of the rig here. And what we're going to do with this is start adding some constraints. So if we go into the constraint tab down here and go location, copy location, our target is going to be track. And that is going to be this empty here that we tracked before. And if you just go offset, it'll go back to where it was before. But if you play the animation, you can see it is moving around here. So that is the first step. If we go back to the start frame and then add in a copy rotation and then just use the dropper tool to select this empty here, you can see everything spins around all of a sudden. That's not right. So I'm going to use Tab to go back into object mode, and then select this empty here, and just go R, Z, 180. Nice. Alright, so it looks like rotations are all set. If you play the animation now, it is copying the location and the rotation of that main bone there. And if we look from the camera view, you can kind of see the main body is tracked to what I was doing. And this is where you can start to see that error of 11 on the tripod track. It's not a huge deal, it just takes a little bit longer to track it in if you want to get something a little bit more accurate. But the cool thing about having this empty here is we can adjust the rotation if we need, just if something is a little bit off. So at the start frame here, you can see it's just a tiny bit off, and we can rotate it over and just adjust it to the rotation that we like. And there you go. Now the reason this might be a little bit messed up is just because it isn't right on target with the location bone. So if we grab it and move it on the y-axis, then just zoom that in a little bit more. Yeah, it matches up a little bit better. Now where this gets really cool is when you start taking the feet bones and kind of posing those to end up matching up with the original footage a little bit. So we can just grab these and move them like that a little. Let's make sure we've got the knee bones going. And that's a little bit crazy right now if you go over here, so we can just grab those and move them down. And if you take a look, this guy is rotating around and it's motion capture, which is pretty sweet. That's all stuff we don't need to animate. Of course, the arms are a little bit crazy, so if you wanted to go in and add keyframes to the arms, you totally could. Another thing that you could potentially do, if you have a couple of GoPros or phones that you want to record with, you could strap one to the head as well, and then get some nice head animation. As you might have noticed before with the whole tracking situation, the more cameras you add, the more complicated it can get. But something fun that we could do potentially, if we go back into our tracking window here, is we could go to the movie clip editor and then drop in this one again, and then track something like the neckline here. So it's not the best track here, but if we just kind of scrub through that, you can see it's pretty much locked onto the neck area. And if we just crop the frames, set the start frame to there, alright, we've got another track. And if we go reconstruction, we can link that empty to the track and then say, I want this bone here in edit mode to not be parented to anything. So here's the bone, relations, uncheck parent. So in pose mode, this will just look like it's stretching around like crazy. But at this point, we can take it and go, I'd like this to copy the location of the neck empty here. And so we can go into our constraints and go copy location and get that empty. So that'd be track 001 there. And now the neck is moving around as well. And that looks pretty crazy at this point. But what if we selected this bone and then that bone and then went Control-Shift-C and got some inverse kinematics going? Then the whole body is following that bone. That is just absolutely insane. And then you could take the neck bone and then copy this rotation of this empty and go something like that. That copies the rotation of the empty. And then everything is just absolutely insane. Oh my goodness. But yeah, we've got some motion capture going on here. And honestly, this is kind of more creepy than I could ever animate it by hand. If we wanted to adjust this crazy 90-degree angle thing, we could just select the bone and go, hey, I want this to be copying the rotation of the second empty that I just duplicated. And this is also parented to the camera, but with that, we can change the rotation of the x-axis to be 90 degrees negative. Alright, that is rotated kind of crazily. Try this. There we go. Now it's right. That is so crazy. But it is very realistic motion, which is kind of what we want with motion capture. Oh, that is never offset. Okay. Now that we offset that, we can grab it and move it down here. Yeah, there we go. Nice. Alright, that's cool. It's kind of crazy still, but Siren Head is pretty crazy. So, yeah, there you go. I'm gonna have so much fun editing this. Let's kind of wrap this up here a little bit. Alright, so I think I'm probably going to leave it off here. We definitely have some very interesting results, and if you take a look here at the camera view, they're pretty much copying the motion of my original video there. So if you found this useful or interesting in any way, and you'd like to see more tutorials like it, there's a link in the description that says free hydraulic kit bash elements. When you click that, what'll happen is it will add you to my email list, and I'll make sure the first thing I send you when you get on that list is a pack of hydraulic kit bash elements made for Blender users like yourself, and these will just kind of help to give you a little bit of a jump start when you're working on mechanical projects. Besides that, the other thing to be aware of is every week when I post a tutorial, I just mail out to that list so that you can stay up to date. But besides that, I hope you have an excellent day, and cheers!